Good afternoon. Happy Monday. Or whatever time zone you're in. A couple days ago, Rogue Nation made a comment in my Discord that has been like gnawing at me a little bit. And it's a really because he's probably said something about it on his channel. He's probably said something about it in other Discords. Other people probably think it. And I just want to kind of address why it's not what you think it is. And the statement was something roughly along the lines of cops don't have to know the law. They're excused from knowing the law, but citizens have to know the law. And then he went on, with his logic about how, the only way to explain it is cops get stupider when they put on their uniform, blah, 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 right? Standard starting off with a really terrible premise and then using bad logic to flow from that bad premise to grounds of sheer stupidity. But I asked him, like, why do you think that citizens have to know the law? State what case it says, what case held that a citizen has to know the law. And instead of citing a case that said the citizen had to know the law, he cited a doctrine, not a doctrine, a maxim of law. Ignorance is no excuse. He cited it in Latin, but it was ignorance is not an excuse, or ignorance isn't a defense. So in criminal law, solely and specifically in criminal law, the defendant cannot plead ignorance of what the law is as a defense to breaking the law. So you could plead, like, let's say that you kill someone, right? You could say, I am going to plead the defense of self-defense, and then I get to prove my self-defense at trial or whatever. But that's a defense, right? Or if you maybe a defense is that you were incapacitated, that someone slipped you a Mickey and you blacked out, so it's not your fault. You took the drugs and you weren't in control of yourself while you were on the drugs, and so you're not legally responsible for the murder or for the killing. Those are defenses. Those are defenses that you can raise to the charge of murder or whatever the charge is. But you can't say, you know what, Your Honor, I didn't know that it was against the law to kill someone. That's not a defense. I mean, the court might be like, well, cool, thanks for telling us, but it's still a crime and you did it, so you're going to face consequences, right? So ignorance of the law isn't a defense for breaking the law in the criminal court, criminal context, while you're a defendant. Now, where do we find that cops can make mistakes of the law? Well, it's from Hein or Heien or whatever, Heien versus North Carolina. That's where the Supreme Court held that a cop can make a reasonable mistake of the law. A cop can make a reasonable mistake of fact and a reasonable mistake of the law in determining whether or not he has probable cause for the stop. In Hein or Heien or whatever, the cop thought, oh, you have to have 2 working taillights. In North Carolina, this guy only has 1 working taillight. I get to pull him over, and then lo and behold, find bad stuff, and away we go. The defendant tried to suppress it, and the Supreme Court ended up saying, look, it was a reasonable mistake of the law. I don't know why they thought it was a reasonable mistake of the law, but they did. Any officer could have made that mistake. So, but notice here that the cop isn't on trial. He's not a defendant. So, in order to establish probable cause, a cop can make a reasonable mistake of the law in order to establish probable cause. Not like if a cop gets charged with a crime, he can't plead ignorance of the law. He can't plead that as a defense. So cops don't have any special mojo that citizens don't. And the only other place they could really plead ignorance of the law as a defendant would be in a civil action, where again they're trying to establish that I actually had probable cause to make the arrest. I was allowed to make a reasonable mistake of law in coming to the conclusion that I get to pull you over. So it's a different time, it's a different place, it's a different thing. And it's comparing apples and oranges to say that citizens have to know the law, which they don't, and cops don't have to know the law, which they kind of do. I mean, they kind of do. They're allowed to make a reasonable mistake of law. Everybody's allowed to make a mistake, right? I mean, we're all humans. Humans make mistakes. That's just par for the course. You can't have humans functioning in a society without mistakes being made. And in a situation like a cop is in, courts have found that, in those split second kind of decisions, cops get to make a decision, and we're not going to hold them to the same standard we would to, as a judge. I get to go back to my chambers, I get to research, I get to do this, I get to do that. I get to take as much time as I need to make my decision. Cops don't have that luxury. They have to make that decision right here and now, before you get away, or before they follow you for too long, or before this, or before that, or before the next thing. So I hope that explains it. It's not a apples to apples comparison. It's you don't get to use ignorance as a defense, but the cop can still establish probable cause even with a reasonable mistake of law. You're not going to get convicted on that mistaken law, but he can establish probable cause with a reasonable mistake of law. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.